Good day and welcome to our online worship service. It's been a while, hasn't it? I have been away on holiday and then I haven't been recording until today. And it's nice to be back with you. My name is Deanne Carter and I'm the pastor of Margaretville and Lower Granville Baptist Churches. And over the course of the next weeks, I will be providing this for you online. And then we'll evaluate and see if we will continue to provide online services or not. But I wanted to come to you and share with you the services over the next week, because we're going to be picking up in our series on the 12 minor prophets, which we started before I went on holiday. These books, as you know, they're found at the end of the Old Testament. And if you remember, before I went on holiday, we made it to probably just a little bit over halfway through the 12 books. And now we are going to go back today and we're going to pick up on the Old Testament book of Habakkuk. Now, this little book, like many of the others in the minor prophets, is rarely preached on. And anyone out there hear a sermon on Habakkuk lately? Probably not. Those speakers who actually follow the lectionary will speak on Habakkuk about once every 3 years or so. So it's not a very common to hear a sermon on Habakkuk. It's just not a book that's popular among the speakers. So I'm excited to see what Habakkuk is all about. And I pray that you will pray as we look at these chapters for the next 3 weeks, actually. And I encourage you to read this book at home in its entirety. It's only 3 chapters. And pray that God will show you something new, that He will refresh what you already know, and you will just feel His Spirit moving in you as you open His Word and look at it, and then join with me for our services. We've already heard that just because the 12 books are known as the minor prophets, it does not mean that they are less important. There is a lot of important information found in these books. So let's dive into Habakkuk chapter 1 today. And I'm going to leave you to read that on your own. But I don't know, I'm wanting to ask if any of you have ever met someone, or maybe you are even that someone who has a lot of questions. Why this? What if? How come? When will? Where? We all know someone like that, don't we? And as I said, maybe we are people like that as well. But we also know that having questions is good, because it's as we ask the questions and learn the answers that we gain information. We can process what's happening. We can relieve stress. Answers to our questions can also give us peace, or not. But what happens when we ask questions that we cannot find the answers to? Especially if they are really important questions. What then? Where is peace to be found if our search only leads to more questions or dead ends? Well, Habakkuk was a man who had questions. Very important questions. Questions that he wanted answers to. And the questions he had, some of us have wrestled with as well, so many years later. Habakkuk was different than the other prophets. They were given messages or pronouncements from God that they delivered to the people. But Habakkuk went in the opposite direction. He spoke to God about the people, not to the people about God. So he is considered a praying prophet rather than a preaching prophet. Now, we don't know very much about Habakkuk other than what we can pick up from these 3 chapters. He was definitely a thinker with all of the questions he asked. He was sensitive, he was caring, and sincere. We also pick up from reading these chapters that he was a man of strong faith and that he was devoted to God. But here at this point in his life, he was perplexed. He was actually heartbroken. Perhaps some of you listening today can identify. Maybe you find yourself with similar feelings as Habakkuk. We believe that God is omnipotent, that he is good, but we struggle to understand why. Why terrible things are happening in our world, to our loved ones, even to us. Habakkuk wrestled with these same issues that so many have wrestled with down over the years. In Habakkuk's day, which was almost 600 years before Jesus was born, there were 10 tribes in the north, and they were known as Israel, and there were 2 tribes in the south known as Judah. And the 10 in the north, they had already been taken into exile by Assyria. And now there were just the 2 left in the south. And Habakkuk, he remembered a time when they walked close to God and when they followed his rules and when they were blessed as a nation because they did so. But now he was observing a different thing. He was observing that they had drifted away. Further and further he saw them go. Their morals had deteriorated. And Babylon was increasing as a world power, and they were an evil people under King Nebuchadnezzar. So Habakkuk watches, and his heart breaks for the people as he sees violence all around him. He sees injustice. He sees wrongdoing. God's laws appear to be helpless. They don't work anymore. And those who do wrong have gotten the upper hand. Habakkuk knew that God had intended for his law to order all of Israel's life to one end. And that one end was to honor God in all things. But it wasn't happening. And it's with a broken heart that Habakkuk cries out to God. Look at verse 1 and 2. How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen, or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that the justice is perverted. It seems that Habakkuk had talked to God about this before, maybe many, many times, for many, many years, asking him to act, to do something, to set things right. But he felt God was silent, and he couldn't understand why. So finally he cries out to God in desperation, how long, Lord? How long must I call to you for help? Why is there such evil? Why is there's so much violence? And why, God, are you not responding? Why are you not doing something? He couldn't understand. So it was with very raw emotions that he came to this point. The Enduring Word Commentary says that Habakkuk dealt with the questions that come up when someone really believes God, yet looks around and sees that the world doesn't seem to match up with how God wants it. Habakkuk saw this, especially remembering the times previous under King Josiah and the revival that was experienced. And he asked the Lord, why are you allowing this? Well, one very important thing we notice about Habakkuk is that he did not let all that he saw and all that he experienced erode his faith. The pain and the disappointments of the people, the oppression of the weak, the fact that the poor were ignored, all the dishonesty, the constant fighting and the conflict in the nation, the destruction of life as God wanted, the fact that God's children had abandoned God and his will. All the pain and all the disappointment that he witnessed, it didn't cause him to step back and to give up on God. Sometimes we see this, don't we? People who go through tragedies, they will want nothing more to do with God. If God answers prayers and is so powerful, then why has he answered my prayer? I don't want to have anything to do with this kind of God that allows so much terrible things to happen in our world. Habakkuk was different. His concerns, his worries, his bewilderment, and his confusion, it sent him to God, not away from God. It sent him to find answers to the questions that he had. And Habakkuk continually looks to God, not around at what was going on. And even though he didn't get the answers at first, or the 100th time, or even more, he continued to pray to God. Do we do that? Do we go to God first to get answers to our questions? Or do we wait and go to him as our last resort? Do we continue to go to him when he doesn't answer and not give up? He needs to be where our focus is. Where we focus our attention, it needs to be to God. When we come up against a struggle, we need to be the type of people of faith who go to God and present our questions and listen for his answer. He still speaks through his word. His word is living. It's alive. And the answers we may need are found there. So what was God's answer to Habakkuk? Well, look at verse 5. Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you will not believe, even if you were told. Sounds good, doesn't it? But then he goes on to tell him what he will do. And the answer is not what Habakkuk had hoped for or expected. God did not say that he was going to come in and draw the people back to him in a nice, polite way. He was not going to go easy on them. They were going to be punished for their disobedience. And he was sending in the Babylonians, or the Chaldeans as they were called. A cruel, a ruthless people. And this was not the answer Habakkuk had hoped for, and definitely not the one that he has expected. God told Habakkuk that the Babylonians, they were going to assert themselves and seize the dwellings that were not their own. That they would come and they would promote their own honor. That they were bent on violence. That they would capture prisoners like the sand. They would capture the fortified cities. And history actually shows us that in 605 BC, they had conquered Assyria and Egypt, and they were the strongest world power. Now, having heard from God what was coming, Habakkuk again has questions. He was in shock. He was appalled that God would use the wicked Babylonians to punish Judah. But you know what? God's ways were not for Habakkuk to understand. God can use whatever means or people he wants to work his will. And his ways are not for us to understand either. Habakkuk, he knew what God's character was like. And since he was holy, Habakkuk was even more confused than ever as to why God would judge wicked Judah by exalting even more wicked Babylon. They just seemed to go against his character. Verse 13, he says, "Your eyes are too pure, Lord, to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves?" Habakkuk wondered, how long, God? How long will you allow these Babylonians to continue their cruel conquest of the nations? It was as if God's people were conquered as easily as fish were caught in a net. Things just continue to get worse. In verse 17, we see, is he, and that's referring to King Nebuchadnezzar, is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy? It was a real problem, and Habakkuk just couldn't understand. Now, back in the beginning of the chapter, we see that he cried out to God, "How long?" And he felt like God wasn't working or caring for the people. He wasn't acting. And now he had God's answer as to what he was doing and what he would do, what would happen. And we see his response. And it was an amazing response, I think. And we really need to ask ourselves, would we respond the same way? What if we have been praying for years about the state of the church in Canada and its decline, because it is declining in many places? And as we go to God in prayer again and again, and we ask him to help us understand why he is not doing something, and we hear this response, "I'm going to fix the problem. I'm going to send an enemy to invade Canada." How would we take that news? Would we say, wait a minute, God, the problem is bad, but your cure is a bit worse, quite a bit worse? Or would we respond like Habakkuk, who continues to pray and talk it out with God? And then amazingly, what does he do? He takes God at his word, saying that he plans to position himself to be alert and on the lookout for what God will do and say next. And we see that in chapter 2. Habakkuk trusts that God is already at work, even if he can't see it. And he trusts that God has more to say, so he commits himself to wait and to listen. And he trusts that what he knows about who God is and what his character is like. This is a good lesson for us all, isn't it? When we have questions that we can't make sense of, we can trust that God is at work. We do not know the future. We don't know what will happen tomorrow or next week. or how things will turn out. But we are to have faith that God is at work, that God is in control. As time marches by, year after year, and we all say, just how fast time seems to be going. But as it marches by and things change, God remains the same. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And we can depend on Him. As we face each new day, may we be like Habakkuk and feel free to ask God questions, to pray for insight, to watch, and to wait. And like Jesus, as He faced the cross and prayed to the Father, may we pray, not my will, but thine be done. Habakkuk watched, he waited. And we're going to leave it at this week, and we'll pick it up again next week and see what happens as the story continues. In closing, I share this illustration. It's of a little boy who was told by his father to wait on a corner bench while he had a tire changed on his car. And it turned out that the car required more attention than the man had anticipated, and it took over an hour. The father anxiously hurried back to get his little boy, and he found him right where he told him to stay. And he said to the little boy, he said, "Did you think I had forgotten about you?" "Oh no," was the reply. "I knew you would come. I wasn't a bit worried. I stayed where you told me, and I waited and I watched for you." We need to be like that little boy. We need to have trust in God as we wait. He is coming. Let us watch and wait in perfect obedience to Him as He works His will. He has it all under control. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for joining with me again today, and I'll see you next week as we look at chapter 2 of Habakkuk. Take care.